God, I hope Jordan Love isn't on this list. Grossi Posse Packer Nation, welcome to another episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Watch these guys do amazing this year. Grossi, and today we're going to be breaking down the 5 worst starting QBs heading into the 2021 season. And before we do that, a caveat I would like to present to you. Just because they are on this list doesn't mean that I think that they're going to be terrible this year, right? Some of them are going to be in better situations than others, which we will talk about, and, I will happily rank them appropriately because of the situation that they're in. But based on how they've been playing, whether it was last season or the past couple of seasons, this is how they made the list. So we're going to start at 5, which is like the 5th worst, getting all the way up to the 1st worst. And listen, some of these guys might not even wind up starting because there's conversations to be had in places like Chicago, Denver, New Orleans. There's lots of conversations to be had on who's even going to be taking the snaps from under center. So I just want to put it out there. If I name a guy and then he goes off and does amazing, like, okay, I'm just saying his body of work hasn't been so great. So it's why he's on the list. So put your pitchforks away, okay? Okay. And another note, I haven't included any of the rookies this year because I have not seen them play a single snap in the NFL. So I think it would be a little bit premature for me to judge them because nobody knows how they're going to do. Trevor Lawrence could suck. He could. I don't know if Jaguars fans could take that, but they could. So starting with number 5, a guy who is shoot in to be the starter for at least a little bit this season, and that is New England Patriots QB Cam Newton. He's number 5 on this list, and I think that he's in a position to do better this season than he did last year. However, there's question marks on how long is it going to be until Mac Jones takes the reins, and on top of that, Cam Newton also struggled a bit last year. The first couple games, you're like, oh, okay, it's pretty good. He's dynamic, he's versatile, he's able to score and get a lot of rushing TDs, right? But taking a look at his stats from last year, not so hot. Completed 65.8% of his passes for 2,657 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Now, there is something to be said. The lack of wide receivers, offensive line wasn't so hot. Lots of people opting out because of COVID. The New England Patriots weren't a great football team last year. However, Cam Newton, in a new system, did struggle as the season went on. So the electrifying player that you saw in the first couple of weeks kind of died down a little bit. Again, I think Cam Newton will be in a better position another year on the Patriots squad, but it seems that he is also just going to be keeping the seat warm for Mac Jones. Now, Bill Belichick, could pull his Sith mind tricks and say, listen, Cam Newton, you're going to start for the entire year, buddy, and just make Mac Jones sit there with a clipboard. And he's like, you learn. So if Cam Newton comes out and with all their new receiving threats, if he's able to be productive, I could see Cam Newton holding on to that starting job for a bit. But right now, he's kind of in my bottom 5 just because the production wasn't there last year. And again, who knows how long he's even going to be the starter. Number 4, you got the guy who sees ghosts, and that's Sam Darnold. Now, this is a situation where I think he is going to do much better in the spot where he's ended up than he did last year with the New Jersey Jets. Because last year with the Jets, woof, completed 59.6% of his passes for a little over 2,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Now, Sam Darnold had very little weapons to throw to, had no run game, and was getting murdered behind that offensive line. And this has kind of been the story for Sam Darnold throughout his entire career with the Jets. He's now going to a place with the Panthers where their offensive line is a little bit better, even though they did let up over 30 sacks last year, but they decided to fix some holes there. On top of that, he has weapons to throw to. He's reunited with Robbie Anderson, who he always had a good rapport with. On top of that, you have CMC in the backfield. You have DJ Moore. There's guys that could really make Sam Darnold shine, and you could see a renaissance when it comes to Sam Darnold. I don't know why I said that in French. It started in Italy. But I've committed now, so. But Darnold is definitely one of these guys to keep an eye on, because if he's able to do better, I think it just points to the inadequacy and dysfunction of the Jets under Adam Gase. I'm actually really pulling for Sam Darnold, because there are some throws that he makes, and there are those like flashes where you're like, wow, that's why he went in the first round. He could be a really good QB. Now, under some competent coaching, on top of that, with some weapons around him, let's see if Sam Darnold can shine. Number 3, you got Daniel Jones of the New Jersey Giants. Now, I was going to actually put him at number 2, but the only reason I didn't is because Saquon Barkley will be back. They brought in Kenny Golladay, and basically the table has been set for Daniel Jones. And if you don't do well, that might be it with your tenure with the Giants. Now, it is interesting to note that they didn't draft an offensive lineman, which was a little head-scratching considering that offensive line last year was abysmal, and Daniel Jones really didn't have time to do anything. Completed 62.5% of his passes for a little over 2,900 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Again, didn't have Saquon Barkley, really had no threats to throw to, even though Evan Ingram somehow made the Pro Bowl over Robert Tonyan. But it's okay, I'm not bitter. But Daniel Jones does have a problem holding on to the football and also running for 80 yards and trying to get a touchdown without tripping over his own feet. But there's not really a stat for that. As I said before, if the Giants are able to remain healthy and he's able to get those star players in action, then yeah, I think Daniel Jones can have a very productive season. Again, I do have some concerns about that offensive line, but you bring in a guy like Kadarius Toney, he could be really, really fun for this team. And it seems like the Giants are trying to put together some type of competent offense. The question is Daniel Jones going to be the guy who's going to be able to run that offense efficiently? I think that's still a big question mark. There's nothing I've seen from Daniel Jones that it's like, oh my God, you're amazing. But you could also point to the fact that he just hasn't had the weapons and he hasn't had the support staff around him to really allow him to shine. Let's see how he does this year. Number 2, you got Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston, whichever one you want to put here. And this is the problem here. I don't know which one is going to start. You had Sean Payton singing all about Taysom Hill and how amazing he is. Played a few games last year, completed 72.7% of his passes for 928 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and again, is a great gadget player, is a dynamic player. Is he enough to start and play a full season? I don't think that has been answered. The guy still struggles when it comes to throwing the ball. He's definitely gotten better. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not, poo-pooing all of his progress, but he does still struggle. I think that the fact that he's on an offense that has a lot of weapons is definitely really good. But I mean, the fact that we're talking about Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston starting, I think that's an issue in of itself. Jameis Winston's coming out and it's just like, guys, I just had to get LASIK surgery. I couldn't see all these years. Okay, that was the issue. That's why I threw all those interceptions, because obviously when you can't see, you make bad decisions. Wait, that doesn't make sense. I think it's honestly just impossible to rank Taysom Hill any higher because you just don't know about the guy. You've seen him in a whole bunch of different roles for that Saints offense, and when he was there as a starter, nothing really was super duper impressive except for like a game or so where he dominated the Falcons. It is possible that Taysom Hill with that high flying offense can be really, really good. You get Michael Thomas out there, him back in action. There's definitely opportunity for Taysom Hill to grow. Question is going to be, is he going to be the full-time starter or is he going to wind up taking a backseat to famous Jameis? And finally, number 1, I'm sorry, Brandon Perna, you got Broncos QB Drew Lock. Now, I had really high hopes for Drew Lock last year. So much so, again, I drafted Cortland Sutton in all of my fantasy drafts. And then he got hurt. And so, yeah, a lot of my fantasy seasons were ruined last year. But a lot of people were expecting Drew Lock to take that next step. A lot of injuries happened to the Broncos, and when Drew Lock did play, it didn't really look so good. Completed 57.3% of his passes, the lowest of anybody on this list. A little over 2,900 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 15 interceptions. Again, a lot of circumstances were against the Broncos last year, had the injury bug. Drew Lock trying to step up into this spot and try to maintain any type of stability. It's tough. But the fact that the Broncos are talking about Aaron Rodgers, the fact that they're bringing in a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, I don't even think the Broncos have a ton of faith in him. You have players who are like, Drew Lock is our guy. But you kind of think it's like, he is there. He has a pulse. He is breathing. So, he is there. He is our guy. But if anyone else wants to, you can. And that's the thing. If they're healthy, he has a ton of weapons. You have Cortland Sutton, you have Jerry Jeudy, you have Noah Fant. There are plenty of opportunities for him to do really, really well. But like many other guys on this list, I feel like this is the last straw for Drew Lock. If he's not able to step up and make something happen and make that offense flow, I don't think you're going to see Drew Lock start many games this year. They'll throw in Teddy Bridgewater, and they'll pick really high next year. Because the Broncos have been assembling a good team. They just need to make sure the guy who's taking the snaps is the guy they want to lead it. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you think there's any other guys who should be on this list? Think that any of these guys shouldn't be on this list? Let me know what you think. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy on all social media. See down below. Check out podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout and thank you to all the patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy and the YouTube members. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.